everyone, welcome back to the channel for my review of Dragon's Rising Season 2, Part 1. It's been over half a year since the finale of Season 1, and it's safe to say 2023 was a fantastic year for the show. It was a year which really revived and offered new life to the show, but it also set up stories and opportunities for many years to come. The second season of Dragon's Rising is our first example of how Season 1's foundation is going to pay off. Now that all the introduction is over, you can expect the next few years of the show to kind of go into deeper stuff and fully unpack Ninjago's new world. Season 2 was the first to do so, and so far, it's been excellent. So with that, let's begin this review. I feel a pretty solid part about the first few episodes is the plot gets started very quickly. In many past seasons, it was common for the first few episodes to be very slow and introductory, as the plot would just be getting started. But that's not the case here. This season picks up right where Season 1 left off, and with a main villain we've already seen. And I love that the first episode shows us so much about what Ross is doing and how his plans are unfolding. The first scene of the season of Ross and Jordana journeying into the Shadow Dojo is such an excellent scene. Compared to the first season, the atmosphere here feels so creepy and unsettling, and I love how well that's conveyed in this first scene, especially through the visuals and the music too. This episode also shows us the ninja team, of course, and the big change is that Ryu is now a teen. I'm really interested to see where this character goes moving forward, because I assume he'll continue to age up, and it already seems like now that he's a teen, he has a bigger role in the story, and in general, just more to do. As for Eren, his biggest issue now is that he's feeling insufficient as a ninja, in large part because he doesn't have powers. This was a natural way to continue his story, and was definitely an unresolved issue from Season 1. We'll discuss this more, but I feel the general introduction is good. Also, Lloyd has been experiencing visions, and we see the first of these in Episode 1. I really like these visions, and they add to the ominous feeling of the season. And it also makes sense, considering Lloyd was a conduit in the previous season. Many aspects of these visions do get explained in Part 1, but there are a few that aren't. Most notably, the appearance of Empress Beatrix, as well as the role of the Fire Source Dragon. These visions are solid and a great way to continue Lloyd's conduit journey. This episode also introduces the new elemental master of smoke, Cinder. And I feel his introduction was very good, it established him as powerful, and I felt it was a solid first fight against the ninja. Episode 2 returns to the Cloud Kingdom, which is now under attack by Ross and his army. And I love that Cloud Kingdom is brought back, as well as Euphrasia. I feel a great part about this season is it very seamlessly brings back side characters from Season 1. There were a lot of 1 to 2 episodes side characters in Season 1, and many of them are brought back in some capacity here, which is really nice to see. And again, the groundwork Season 1 did to kind of fix Cloud Kingdom as a realm continues to pay off here. This episode is also our first look at Shatterspin, which I really enjoy as a martial art. Visually, Shatterspin looks excellent, and it makes fights feel so much more dynamic. As emphasized in this season, Shatterspin is all about strength, and it makes it feel like this martial art actually has a principle or concept, and isn't just a fancy new power. Shatterspin isn't anything groundbreaking, but it's a solid example of the dark secrets that this season wants to explore. It's a great representation of Ross's own belief in strength, and what his master taught him. We also learn about the Gong Mallet of Shattering. The idea is that they kind of shatter the good in the people who are using the wolf masks, which allows the users to overcome their limits and become more powerful. Overall, pretty cool idea. Lastly, this episode confirms that Ross is the one who cursed the Cloud Kingdom worms, which is a nice little mystery from Season 1 that we see very quickly resolved here. The first thing I want to discuss in Episode 3 is the Source Dragon vision, and I think this is an excellent scene. We learn 4 of the Source Dragon's names: energy, motion, strength, and life, which I feel is way more interesting than naming the dragons after elements. I love the characterization of the Source Dragons as these gods who don't really interfere with mortal matters, and that very much separates them from other dragons. Of the 4 who speak, I really enjoy their voice acting, and just in general, the grand sense of this scene. And I love that Lloyd freeing the Energy Dragon in Season 1 has repercussions here, and it earns him the trust of the Source Dragons. I'd been looking forward to this scene, and it was really nice to see it in its final version. Anyways, we're a couple minutes in, and I realize I haven't discussed the intro yet. And honestly, I really enjoy it. I feel this intro is very exciting, and just as in the first season, I love the return to more abstract, season-themed intros. Having the battle take place on the Gong with the blood moon above, great atmosphere. There's a couple instances where the transition to the intro isn't as good, but there's also instances where it really works, such as in Episode 10. Back to Episode 3, I enjoyed the journey through the cave, and especially the visions the ninja experience. Great foreshadowing with Jay's fate. Moving on to Episode 4, this is the first appearance of Cole in Dragon's Rising Season 2, and honestly, I'm very confused about the timeline of his journey. This is the first time he's returned to the Finders since he left, but it also seems like, based on the Elemental Mech shorts, he also visited the Ninja. Kind of a confusing chain of events that never really gets clarified. Just like in season 1, I really enjoy Cole in this season. I love seeing his commitment to his new family, as well as his relationship with Gio. These two 100% should be together, and I hope the show makes it official sometime soon. Even though he's more part of the B plot, I enjoy that Cole has more to do this season, and we get to see him with Zayn a lot. As for Zayn, I feel the same about him as I did for season 1. Zayn just doesn't really have as much personality or attention in the story as he used to, but he's still not a bad character by any means. He has a lot of very funny moments, and I do like that compared to season 1. He doesn't really have just busy work to do, he is very much involved in the story. Also, I was really not a fan of Zayn's fake-out death yet again in episode 8, although, to be fair, there have been more egregious examples. The overarching issue with Zayn is he hasn't had a major story in years, and it's long overdue. This season probably isn't going to be it, but hopefully season 3 can. Moving on, the major backstory this season comes in episode 5, and we learned that Bonzel, a seemingly insignificant character from season 1, is in fact a very powerful spell. This is a cool story, and I love when Ninjago takes these insignificant characters and gives them bigger purpose. This backstory scene is animated very nicely, and I like how they tie the Dragon Masters to the Forbidden Five. I love how season 2 builds up the Forbidden Five and portrays them as dangerous, and as something that had to be wiped from history. The other flashback scene shows how it was in fact Wu who convinced Bonzel to take on a skeleton form. And I love the scene. It's such an unlikely interaction, but it works so well. It conveys how caring and warm Wu is, and I also love the reference to his relationship with Garmadon, and how their falling out made him feel lonely. This is an aspect that was never really touched upon in previous seasons, and ultimately it was finding the ninja that helped him overcome this feeling. Genuinely fantastic scene, and I love seeing Wu connect his own life experiences to Bonzel's situation. And I feel Bonzel's a great side character and a solid addition to Ninjago's roster. Great voice acting, love the humor, and a solid backstory too. The idea of a character who's just magic is really interesting. I want to pivot back to the main story of this season, which involves the ninja training with the Dragon Masters. And there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I love Egalt and Ratu, and they both serve unique purposes in the story. Egalt especially is fantastic. I love this trope of him being a jaded master who over time becomes inspired by his students. Egalt is this old master who's long past his prime and also seems to be physically dying too. So I think it's cool that the ninja give him new hope. Beyond that, Egalt also has a fantastic design and a really excellent voice too. Really hope we learn more about him and why he hates humans. Ratu, I feel, is pretty good, not as interesting as Egalt, and I'm not a huge fan of her voice, but I feel she is very important to the story. And I really enjoyed seeing her advise Lloyd about his visions, and having to accept them. It was good to have a more kind dragon advising the ninja, because Egalt wouldn't have fit that role. I think Egalt's teachings are very interesting conceptually and spiritually as well. In comparison to Shatterspin, which is about power, Rising Dragon is all about motion, and finding your place in the universe. This is such a cool idea, and like I said earlier about Shatterspin, it makes Rising Dragon feel like more than just a fancy new power. This idea of motion is also cool, because there are several characters in the season who are struggling to accept things about themselves. For example, later on we see Lloyd accept his visions, and at this point he's able to do Rising Dragon. Meanwhile, Aaron continues to struggle throughout this arc, and after a training accident gone wrong, which injures Egalt, he's demoted down to First Fang. It was pretty sad to see what Aaron had to go through in these episodes, because there isn't really a happy ending. These episodes reinforce the idea that Aaron is discontent with himself and about his ninja journey. Several people tell him that every ninja has a different path, but this doesn't really make him feel better about his shortcomings. I love how these episodes are clearly building towards something bigger for his character, likely in part 2. I also enjoyed Wildfire this season. She has a pretty small role, but she definitely has some funny scenes, and I also liked her interactions with Egalt. And also we gotta discuss Kai and Nia, and their relationship gets the most emphasis it's had in years. I absolutely love the flashback of them in the blacksmith shop, and how that was interspersed with their training. With Jay out of the picture for now, it was really nice to see the relationship between Kai and Nia built upon. This season really captures how much these two mean to each other in a way that previous seasons never did. And I love how Nia is able to help ground Kai and remind him of times when they didn't have to worry about saving the world. And Kai and his note is excellent in the season 2. This is his biggest role in years, and he's just so cool here. Similar to Zayn, he's also had this issue where he just wasn't focused on enough, but that's finally changed. Kai just feels very selfless and heroic here, and previous seasons haven't really emphasized that. To me, his courage is very reminiscent of early Ninjago, and it's nice to see that side of him back. But at the same time, it's very clear that Kai has grown up and significantly matured. This was also clear in season 1, but season 2 is really focused on it. I love Kai's fate at the end of episode 10, and how despite what happened to him, he remains optimistic. In addition to Lloyd, Kai is one of the characters who has grown up the most in the series, and this season really shows it. Anyways, going back to Cole and Zayn's story, they come into contact with Dorama, which was kind of unexpected. This to me felt like a diversion for more interesting stuff, but at the same time, it wasn't bad. And I really like how Duraba could be a mechanic type villain who just shows up here and there. After defeating Duraba, Cole, Zeta, and Basel journey to the new realm of Mysterium. This is the only new realm introduced in the season so far, and it's pretty interesting. Mysterium is, I guess kind of obviously, a very mysterious place, and there's a lot of potential. It's not really explored as much as I would have liked, but that's okay. The main character from Mysterium is Gandalaria, and she is of course the sorceress who created Basel. And to say the least, she's a very interesting character. She's very quirky and at times definitely funny. I do feel like some parts with her kind of dragged on a bit, particularly when they were trying to escape the storehouse. That whole conflict felt very drawn out. But it is nice to see how accepting Gandalaria is of Basel, because she was worried about how her creator would respond to her taking a skeleton form. This is also where the administration shows up. I really like their presence here, and how they feel like such a bureaucratic nuisance. We also see Jay for longer than we saw him in season 1, and I really enjoyed his scenes. I love how he sees his reflection and is just completely confused by it, and I like that this story has been built up over multiple seasons. It's also interesting that he has to hide his powers, as if he's worried that the administration would punish him. Yeah, Jay's scene is good. My only big problem is his voice has gotten so high-pitched, it's honestly quite annoying, and I wish they would lower it to how it used to be. And now it's time to discuss the final battle at the Blood Moon. And it was really sad to see Eagle to Ratu turn to stone. This definitely felt a bit unexpected. And we do see the ninjas split up for a bit as they journey into the forest. I enjoyed the action scene of Kai scaling the mountain, as well as Ryu flying for the first time. And it all brings us to this final conflict. And Ninjago's fighting animation, I feel, has noticeably improved since season 1. There were a lot of beautiful fights, especially with Rising Dragon and Shatterspin, and it was excellent to watch. I like how both sides here kind of partially win and partially lose as well. Ross only gets one of the Forbidden 5 out, and at the same time the ninja lose Kai and Bonzel. There's a ton of details I want to discuss in this finale, and let's discuss the Forbidden 5 first. As I said earlier, the Forbidden 5 are really nicely built up in the season. Great designs, great backstory. When we actually see Noct in the finale, he does feel underpowered. Him getting subdued by Ross with a control device is a super cool scene, but it doesn't actually make sense. Based on how the rest of the season portrayed them, you would think Noct is much more powerful than that, and a control device should be no match for Noct. But yeah, the Forbidden 5 are cool. I'm excited to see how they play into Ross's plan. Next up for the villains is Cinder, who we discussed earlier. And Cinder's pretty cool. He does a lot of fighting, and it's really cool to see him use Shatterspin, as well as Smoke. Cinder is a solid adversary, but he doesn't have much of a character. He feels evil for the sake of it, and his backstory isn't explained. This is why I like Jordana more. Of course, she was in season 1 first, so that helps. But here, we really see her descend into villainy. Her whole life, nobody recognized her talent until Ross, and she loves that. It was awesome to see her start using magic, and this whole bit of nobody knowing her name is hilarious. Jordana's fate at the end of part 1 is very unclear. Somehow, the spell backfired and affected her, but we don't know how or why. And that's super interesting. And last but not least is Ross. And Ross is just fantastic. He is the best villain the show has had in years, and I love these flashbacks of him as a child, and how we see how powerless he was, before his master found him. The way season 2 builds up towards Ross's master is just phenomenal. We see a couple scenes where Ross is summoned by his master into this void space, and we see Ross receive instructions from his master, but we never hear his master's voice, and I love how they're building up towards this threat. We also see Ross's master teleport him and the Shadow Dojo, and it seems like Ross's master is this all-powerful being, almost like a source dragon. The evidence strongly suggests that Ross's master is a source dragon, and if this is the case, it'll be one of the coolest decisions by the show ever. I also want to discuss Ross's battle against Eren, because it's such a good scene. This fight is brutal, and there's so many cool parallels here. Ross destroys Eren and tells him he hasn't improved at all since they first met, and that with a better master, he too could be better. This is such a brutal scene because, yeah, Eren is still so powerless compared to Ross, and this is after a year of training. This, as well as Eren's other setbacks earlier in the season, I feel are really going to play a role in his character story in part 2. We could see him ditch Lloyd, or perhaps leave the team. The thing is though, Lloyd sees promise in Eren, even if he doesn't see it in himself. And that's a recurring theme here. Ross's master saw strength in a completely powerless and helpless Ross. Ross himself saw promise in Jordana, and Wu saw promise in Bonzel, and her ability to be something better. It's an excellent theme in season 2, and just honestly excellent writing. The last thing to discuss is the main ninja themselves. And compared to season 1, Sora definitely has a much smaller role. It is nice to see she's more optimistic and confident about herself, which is a good follow-up from season 1. And I still love how her friendship with Eren is portrayed. And moving on to Eren, we've discussed him a lot already, but I love how the season so far is building up Eren's story. And he has a lot of struggles with his training, none of which are really resolved. There's also a scene in episode 10 where Eren believes he did object spinjitzu, but it was really Sora's powers. I have a feeling the secret is going to be a big deal in part 2, and I'm really excited about how they're setting up a potential rift between Eren and Sora. I also love how Eren continues to search for his parents and miss them, and how he wants them to be proud of him. Eren has struggled so much in his ninja journey so far, and I have a feeling the setup is really going to pay off. I'm so happy the show isn't taking the easy way out by giving it powers or another short-term solution. Instead, they seem to be playing a longer game, which I'm very excited for. Last but not least, we have Lloyd, who in this season suffers from visions and nightmares as a result of being the conduit. Because of this, he questions his ability to keep the team safe and lead the ninja. I love his cave vision in episode 3, where we see he's still worried about living up to Wu's legacy. It was pretty sad to see what he had to experience, and how he was in constant fear. But the resolution is fantastic. In the end, Lloyd learns that he has to accept the visions and let them flow. And in doing this, he's able to unlock the Rising Dragon. This was an excellent story about mental health, and overall just taking care of yourself. And I feel this season's storytelling is very mature at times. I love how the show isn't afraid to show its young viewers these themes, which is something a lot of other seasons didn't do. Based on all I've discussed so far, I would give Season 2 Part 1 a 9 out of 10. It was a fantastic start to Season 2. And as we move into Part 2, I can't wait to see how these stories continue, as well as new additions such as the Tournament of Sources. I truly believe we're at the beginning of Ninjago's next peak, and I can't wait to see where this journey takes us next. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, share with anyone Devon you know. Share your thoughts on the first half of Season 2 below, and I'll see you guys next time.